Okay, JB, we're excited about another 61 Corvette update.
Yes.
What's going on? You know, I got to quickly say, it's kind of weird for me as a novice. Last time I saw this thing, it was beautifully shiny. Looked all done, ready to staple chrome onto it. And now it's all dull, and I'm like, what?
Well, because your eye is fooling you into thinking that it's done, and there are ever so subtle problems that are difficult to pick out. But if you have any problem whatsoever, you got to go back and resand it, because in the final buffing of the car, which is really almost the last step, you're going to find a little tiny bit of dust. You're going to find any number of little tiny things you really were not aware of. You can look at the whole car, but we're talking about 100 square feet here. So, yeah. You know, I remember asking Oscar why it was taking so long to do a particular car, and he said, "Did you ever look at the square feet on this car?"
That's an interesting.
And
thing.
It was a Buick, and it was twice as much as this.
Wow.
So you can imagine why would it go in the same amount of time if it's twice as big? Right. So big cars and cars that are curvy like Corvettes, cars that have all those curves that have to be just flawless, yeah, really create the necessity for a different kind of procedure, and it's going to take more time.
Right.
And so that's what we got here. Yes, these doors, as a for instance, are really nice, but if you look really, really, really closely, you see a tiny bit of mottling, and you can see here where he has sanded this out probably with up to 1,000 grit, and then when he hits this with a buffer, it'll be correct.
Okay, so what is the process? You had the coats of paint put on.
Right.
And then there's, clarify for me, buffing and color sanding and polishing. What do those things mean, those different
Okay,
terms?
well, first of all, you're doing this as you go. If you remember back to the earlier episodes on the Corvette, we had a lot of sanding, and then we put another layer of primer. Yep. At this level, what we're doing is we're putting on a substantial amount of paint so that when we sand it down, we don't go through.
Right.
Because if we sand through, you're going to see primer. So when we sand this, even with 1,000 or 1,500 or 3,000 grit, we can't sand through. Now, obviously, a very fine sandpaper like that is not going to take much off, but and these panels are so good that it won't really require a lot of heavy sanding or coarse sandpaper. So we're going to be fine in terms of our end result. We're not going to have to go back in and repaint anything. Mm-hmm. Part of that was in the way that we picked the color. And the color has no metallic in it. It is a black, and it is a type of material that you can put on really thick and not worry about it cracking or crazing later down the road. So that means that I'm going to put a substantial amount on, and so that I can sand it back and get it really right. Good. And if I don't put enough paint on, I'm going to sand right through to the layer below it, and now you're going to see it. Yeah. So we can't have that. Okay. So you can see over here where he's sanded, he's probably up to maybe as much as 1,000 or 2,000 grit near this level. You never touch it with your fingers because your fingers are oily.
Okay, right. I'll keep away from it.
But the point is that you can see that there are no flaws in it any longer. Now you notice again he sands to this line up here. He's watching to see that crease remains constant, because that's how you judge a car. The same thing on the side body line. It does the very same thing. If this thing walks up and down, then it's not very good body work, and obviously the paint can't fix bad body work.
Right.
The body work is 90% of it, maybe more, and the paint cannot remedy something you did underneath it. It's just not. It doesn't make any sense on the face of it.
Right.
So now we're going to just do our final color sanding and buffing. We'll probably leave the jams alone.
Technically, tell me, what does the word color sanding, what does that really mean?
Color sanding means that instead of sanding on a primer, we're sanding on the finished color.
Okay.
There's still a bit of sanding, and then of course the ultimate and last step is the buffing.
Okay.
But all the work is, like, again, it's 99% earlier work from the very beginning. Okay. When you get to the color sanding and buffing, it should be very small part of the project. And if you cut through with your final sanding and you see layers of primer, you got a problem. Okay. And you can't have that. So you got to put a substantial amount of paint on it. Mm-hmm. The paints today are catalyzed so that they don't have the same problem as they did in earlier cases, where if you put on too much paint, it would literally become unstable, and it would crack or draw. Mm-hmm. This new stuff is catalyzed, so it's rock hard. A little bit harder to sand, but it also is a lot more durable, and it'll sit out in the sun.
Okay.
This is a black car in Arizona. It's going to sit out in the sun at some
Get
point.
some sunshine.
So it's got to be really well done.
I've got another question for you. As I'm looking at this front fender, I'm seeing the droplets from moisture.
Right.
So now on color sanding, is that a wet situation?
Exactly. The last one will be wet and dry.
It's dry, right?
Correct. The last, well, we're in this is the paint now. Okay. This is where he's using very small grit sandpaper. He uses this big block in this particular area because never, ever use small blocks. There's no reason to use a small block. All you're doing is narrowing your work.
Yeah.
And you can just dig a trough right here, and then you've got high, trough, high. Okay. When you use really long sanding blocks like this one, this is a soft kind of a material so that it doesn't dig in. And then of course he's using a very small grit of paper.
So he's got a bucket of water here, and he's got a rag, and so it stays wet.
Exactly. That water lubricates the sanding and removes the paint that's being sanded off. The tiny thousandths of an inch that are being sanded off. It facilitates that process. So you never want to sand it dry.
Okay. All right.
You lubricate it with the water, and then that carries the sanded part away and down onto the floor, and that's what you see around it. And that's what you see here in the non-sanded area. That's water with sanded paint in it.
Okay.
Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. So he's obviously just going around the car, getting it all.
You notice he starts at the top and works down.
Right.
You never go to the bottom and work up.
Okay. That's why the bottom areas are.
You want this, just to save time, you want the sanded material to fall on the floor and get away from the car.
Yep. And then obviously all the body parts that aren't attached are getting the same treatment.
Correct.
You know, we see the doors there, but there's also the other
the hood and the
deck lid
and the convertible cover.
Right. Very
good. Important that you just keep the car clean. If it gets dirty, wipe it off with a soft rag. Keep it indoors as much as possible. When you take it out, don't obsess over it being having a little dirt on it.
Yeah.
If you can't wash it off, don't wipe it off with a dry rag. You're just scratching the paint.
Again, water becomes a lubricant and a way to carry stuff away.
Exactly.
Okay.
You don't need wax. I have never waxed a car in 50 years.
Wow.
I was told 50 years ago by some very astute painters, do not go near a paint job with wax. And another little problem comes up. What happens if you're in an accident? What if you have damage? And now you've waxed the car. How's that paint going to stick? How's the subsequent paint on the repair going to stick to wax?
Right.
It can't. So you've just made
a
terminal problem for your car. And all cars are exposed to a certain amount of small damage. Yeah. We have a Cobra coming in here for repair. And we'll just hope it hasn't been waxed.
Right.
Okay. But if it has, we're going to strip all that wax off. That's yet another thing that he's got to pay for to get that out of the way so that we can get good adhesion on the paint.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, thanks for the update, man.
You bet.
This is good.